Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here in front of a real live audience after all the webinars. So thank you, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about CICD and GitHub Actions. I'm Yael Balla. I'm head of engineering in Balance. And yes, we're hiring, like everyone. And I chose this topic because actually the first thing I did when I arrived to Balance was to create a CI/CD pipeline and transfer us to a CI/CD workflow. And so I can tell you it really made a difference. So in this session, I'm going to talk about what CI/CD is and why we need it. Some basic concept of GitHub Actions, and also we'll even build together a pipeline using GitHub Actions. And we only have 15 minutes, so let's start. So what CI/CD is, I know many of you are probably already working with that, but let me just align on the concept. So CI/CD is the practice where developers merge their code into a shared repository very, very often, a few times a day. And every such commit triggers a build, a pipeline that build the code, test it, deploy it, and sometimes if there is a problem, even rollback. And all of this is not possible without automation. We don't want to rely on any manual step during this process because we want to make sure it is working properly. So for that, we need some kinds of tooling. We need a CI server or a build server. And this pipeline, usually what you know as a CI/CD pipeline. Every commit trigger the CI part, which is actually the build, unit test, end-to-end test, integration test. This thing can also run before you actually merge the code. When you only open the PR, you usually have tests that are running and let you know if it's OK to merge it into the master branch or not. You can even have a person, a code review. It's very recommended that someone will review the code before it's merged. And you also want, and after you merge it, you probably want to also deploy it to some kind of testing environment or staging environment where you can run all kinds of integration tests on live environment. And if everything is working as it should, to also deploy it to production. So wait, some of you are probably saying, but why do we need that every commit will trigger deployment to production? We're just fine with deploying once a week or once every 2 weeks. And the truth is the reason to do that is actually our customers. Our customers don't want they don't want to wait to some specific date in the future in order to receive a feature. At Balance, we are a small startup, and we have customers, and if we promise them something, we want it to be available as soon as possible. It means when the work on that feature is done, we want it to arrive to the customer. And another reason that we want this to work in a CI/CD environment is actually because it saves us time. It actually protects us, because every time we have a merge and we deploy it to production, we have to make sure that this change is very, very small. It allows us to control what we enter into our code base and to isolate changes. So we make sure that we know what it affects, and as I said, if there is a problem, we can roll it back. And another important thing, the third important thing, is that it actually makes developer closer to production. Because when we merge the code, our work is not done. We need to look on what is going on with this feature that we wrote. We want to know who is using it, when do they use it, how do they use it, and if it will be deployed sometime in the future, where on a date that we have no control on, we'll probably move on to our next task. And we don't want that. We want to make the production part as part of our feature development. So for that, we need automation in order to make sure that every time we merge, it will be a deployment happening. We can't rely on manual steps, so we have all kinds of services and tools that can do it for us. I assume many of you are working with Jenkins or Circle CI, GitLab CI. Today, I chose to talk about GitHub Actions. Why? Because it's easy. It's a very, very easy tool. It's part of your repositories. There is no integration needed. It's part of your source control tool. It's very intuitive for us, the developers. The code is a YAML file inside our project, and we can change it every time our code changes. And in addition, the whole idea behind GitHub Actions, right, the name Actions, is that there is already a predefined list of integration that we can reuse in every build that someone else already wrote for us. So the basic unit, the basic thing in GitHub Actions is a workflow. And what is a workflow? It's very general. It's a combination of a trigger event and what to do when this event happens. A trigger event can be a commit, it can be a PR, it can be a new branch, or even a new GitHub issue, if you want. And the step to run, it can also be manual, by the way. And the step to run is a job, where each job can be a list of actions or command that we want to run, and the command can be just any terminal command that you run locally. So this is the structure for the workflow file. First, it's a very readable, it's a YAML. The first thing is the name. This is what you will see in the UI. The on is the trigger event, when it should run. Here you can see it is running on every pull request on the main branch. Then you have the job name, which you can give every name that works for you. Every run that we have is running on GitHub servers, right? And they have a fresh environment, and you can choose which environment you want. In this case, it's Ubuntu. There are a list of steps that you want to be executed. There is a difference between if it's an action or a command. When it's an action, you need to write uses. And when it's a command, you just need to write run and the command itself. The first thing we're doing here in this job, and probably on every workflow, will be to check out the code of this repository. So now let's do a demo. OK, how much time do I have? I don't. OK. Let's. OK, great. So 7 more minutes. OK, we have a lot of time. Great. So this is just a sample project. You can see here some kind of starter I used. It has a Docker. It has a Node.js. And it's on GitHub. And what you can see here, there is a tab called Actions. So what we will do now is actually create a new workflow. So we went to the Actions tab and created a new workflow. And GitHub people were nice to us, and they already created templates for a lot of common use cases. You can see here they identify the repo, they identify that there is a Docker, so we can have a workflow defined for Docker projects. And there are templates for deployment and template for continuous integration. For us, we'll start with continuous integration. So we'll search something with a node, and we can, OK, let me search. This is deploy, publish, package. OK, Node.js. So we'll set up this workflow. We can, of course, edit it, but this is just a nice way to start. You can see that this creates a file named Node.js-YAML inside GitHub workflow in our repository. And it's the same structure as I showed before. Here, we can see it's also running on every push to this branch and on every pull request. In the default template, there is a nice thing called strategy. What does it mean to call it strategy? It means I can run this, the job that I defined here several times, each time for the different variable value. So I have a node version 12, 14, and 16. We will later see how it works. And I have these steps. The first one is checkout. Then I'm using another action called setup node, and it receives a parameter with the environment variables, a parameter named node version that will be 12, 14, or 16, like I defined here. Then I'm running the commands I know that exist for my project, which is npm CI to install dependencies, run build. You can see here the added if present, and npm test. And I know I also have lint, so I can add another command. OK. So now let's see how it runs. I'm creating a branch and a pull request. And immediately, I can see it running, or not immediately, in a second. I can see it running here. And I can see 3 instances of the job, each one for a different node version. And when I press the details here, I can see the log of what it is doing at the moment. And when it will all over, I will see a green V next to it, and my pull request will be all the job will finish successfully, and my pull one didn't work. I don't know why, but it's actually a good example to see. The lint that I added probably did something bad. But anyway, it's a good example. I can see it's failed, and I can also see that what happened. Yeah, I need to add npm run. Right, correct. And I will see the failed job on my GitHub PR. So in this job, what I used the command that I know from my environment, but I also used things that called actions. So where are all these actions coming from? There is a marketplace of actions that contains almost everything that you need. For example, if I'm using a EKS, then I will see all the actions that allow me to deploy my Docker into EKS. Okay. And if I write Slack, for example, I can see I have an action that allows me to send notification to Slack. You can see that some of the actions have this blue V on it. It means that it was verified by GitHub, because all these actions are actually open sourced. And if you're worried about if you want to use it or not, so the ones that are verified are probably better. And if we'll go into every action, we can see the example of how we can use it. For example, if we want our build to send Slack notification, we need to say which channel, what is the Slack message that we want to use, and how to connect to Slack, meaning we need to have some kind of credentials. Okay? So this brings me to that GitHub allows you to also store secrets, so you can easily integrate them into the workflow. We have job dependencies. We have a lot of extra features like running GitHub Actions into a step in our own processes and things like that. But this was just a glimpse into what GitHub Actions can do for you. So what have we learned today in these 15 minutes? First is that CICD is a must. It's a must for a startup to run fast. and it's very, it actually helps us to be, to engage better with our customers, and that it's very easy to do that using GitHub Actions, and it's also fun. Thank you. If you have any question, you can find me here in the conference or my email, LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone.